Here, Sophie Elsworth here with us. Sophie, very good morning to you. News Corps Australia's Europe correspondent, of course. You were up at Blackpool yesterday for day one of the conference. It's all over the place, isn't it?
Yes, I was at Liverpool yesterday, Mike, day one of the conference, and it's not probably going as well as they want,
no.
I would argue. They've obviously had a lot of distractions here. They've got the Andy Burnham issue. There were, interestingly, when I arrived, lots of protests as well around the conference, and they're getting all those headlines that they didn't want, and I don't think it helped when Sir Keir Starmer made those remarks about Nigel Farage and his racist policy, because that just set the news agenda for the day.
It did, because he's now having to spend time answering questions about it. All of his fellow ministers are being asked about it. You know, do you think Nigel Farage is a racist? You know, it's obviously a stupid thing to say. We're also now being told that he wasn't planning to say it. That, you know, he had his fixed, answers ready, and then he was kind of pushed on it, and he came out with it, because you can't differentiate between so-called racist policy and racists. I mean, if you're accusing somebody of having racist policy, then by association you're accusing the party of being racist and the leader of the party of being racist, aren't you?
Well, it's very offensive, obviously, to be calling someone racist. It's not something you do lightly. Right. And he's tarnishing a lot of Britons, including Reform supporters, if he's going to tar them with that label. I think that's a very silly thing to do. And now it seems like he said this sort of in the heat of the moment, and now he's having to backtrack from it or try and explain himself. What a mess, Mike.
I know, totally. He's also handed another prize to Nigel Farage, who's just come out and said this morning in the papers, well, you know, this is an insult to all the decent, hard-working people of Britain who just want immigration under control, which it currently isn't. And so, you know, these are people who he thinks are going to come back and vote Labour. They're not going to.
Well, that's true, Mike. And also, if I was in his media advising circle, I'd be pretty annoyed with the Prime Minister. It seems like he just goes a bit rogue, and then they'll be there trying to be in damage control now to work out how to get through this. And can he stop talking about Nigel Farage?
I know.
He just keeps rabbiting on about him. Stop it. You're just giving him more and more oxygen. He's not helping himself. I find that incredible how much he talks about Nigel Farage.
Well, I'm sure Nigel Farage is quite happy about it, because it just boosts his numbers every single time. Another guy who doesn't want to talk about Nigel Farage was the Australian Prime Minister. He was here, of course, the end of last week for this progressives get-together where, you know, Emmanuel Macron and Albanese and all these characters all sat around congratulating themselves for being so brilliant and so kind of, you know, centre ground and, you know, moral and all right, and everything was great. But Albanese didn't want to be asked questions. You were asking him questions about Nigel Farage. What did he say?
Correct. So he was here last week, Mike. The Australian Prime Minister was in the UK for the last 3 days. Now, we asked him specifically, I asked him, have you ever met Nigel Farage? He was pretty snappy. He said no. And the Australian media pack kept pushing him. Will you meet him? Are you interested in meeting him? Given he's on track to be Britain's next Prime Minister, he's got no interest. He said he doesn't like divisive politics. He was quite scathing of reform. And this is, again, very, very silly, because if the polls are correct, the next Prime Minister of this country could well be Nigel Farage. He should be getting to know Nigel Farage too, because he's about to meet with Donald Trump next month. And as we know, Nigel Farage gets on incredibly well with Donald Trump. So I think it's quite a silly move for him to be, again, criticising him.
But it also shows you what the kind of quality and calibre of these politicians is. You know, these politicians who come from what they like to think of as the centre-left, it's probably quite a lot further over than that, where they don't respect the actual electorate. You know, Nigel Farage is already, forget about what the polls are saying, he's already had a massive win in the local elections in May. You know, he's already done what nobody thought he could do, which is to get 5 MPs into Parliament. You know, the idea that they don't like you because they don't like your politics, even though you've been elected by a vast majority of people in your constituency, I think it's pretty arrogant, to be honest.
Well, Mike, he did say his defence to this was that he had met with Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch while he was here, so he was meeting with the opposition, but as I said, he doesn't want to meet with Nigel Farage. Now, shouldn't he be thinking that he should at least meet Nigel Farage, given the impact he's having here and given that Britain and Australia are extremely close allies?
You would think. He also got drawn on the royal situation. You were up in Balmoral because he went up to see the King. But he's a guy who's formerly kind of talked about republicanism in Australia, isn't he?
Absolutely. He's a Republican really at heart, but we had a referendum a couple of years ago to introduce a voice to Parliament, and that got thumped and failed. And so he's a bit gun-shy in terms of having another referendum during his term. Now, we asked him, he's here meeting King Charles. He met him. He flew up to Balmoral on the weekend to meet with the King. He had a pretty good meeting, he said, with the King, but he said that originally he said there will be no referendum in his term. He's got a couple more years in his current term. But then the media pushed him further. Will there be a referendum for Australia to move to a republic while he is Prime Minister? And he said no.
Yeah. So that's a new development for him, isn't it?
That is. So while he's Prime Minister, he has said there will be no referendum in Australia to move to a monarchy, to move to a republic. Now, Mike, there was a poll last year, just after the King and Queen came to Australia in October, asking Australians, should we remain a monarchy? And it found 57% said yes. Now, there's many polls that have been done over this over the years, and everyone pretty much comes out, we want to stay as a monarchy. We don't want to move to a republic.
Is it one of these things as well that's been driven a little bit by some in the media who think that, you know, that's what they'd like to see, so they're just going to keep asking?
Well, we do have a largely left-leaning media in Australia who are pro-republic, so of course they would love to become a republic. The Aussies don't want it. They love the royal family, they like it the way it is, and the question is, if we did become a republic, how would it work? And no one has an answer to that.
That's the big problem, isn't it? That's what they say here as well, was that there was a time when people were talking about that, and you'd end up with President Tony Blair, which nobody wants. I mean, it's bad enough with him running the country as it is from behind the scenes. But anyway, good to see you. Sophie Elsworth, News Corp Australia's Europe correspondent.